This is your World War III update. Gold hit an all-time high of $3,117 today as the NASDAQ is nosediving. Retail got rugged once again, stuck in the bear trap, as global investors divest from U.S. equities and reallocate those funds into precious metals because they know World War III is here to stay. Right now, the United Kingdom and France are preparing to deploy troops or reassurance forces into Ukraine, finalizing everything as they send their chiefs of staff to this location after they've concluded this coalition of the willing meeting. And they're going to put a tripwire into Ukraine so that right around the time that the war between Iran and the United States flares up, which is going to be around spring, that's when things are going to flare up in Europe as well. Now, for the time being, we have the sustained temporizing of negotiations between the Russians and the Americans, both playing into this delusion that they're going to do business someday, and they're going to reopen Nord Stream and sell the gas to the Europeans who don't even want it, who are confiscating Russian oil tankers in the Baltic as we speak. The Russians are planning a major offensive, into the Kharkov region, which is one of the biggest cities in Ukraine. They need this to form a rampart and to basically fill the gap that exists between Belarus and the Russian mainland in order to basically create a bulwark that Nato cannot penetrate. They want to have a buffer zone between Russia and the West, which is now going to subsume Ukraine. Everything is going downhill fast. We now have confirmation via satellite that indeed more stealth bombers have made their way to Diego Garcia Air Base. More. Quite possibly 9, because some weren't in the hangars. Now, it could just be that they're flying sorties to the Houthis. They're conveniently parked about 4,000 kilometers outside of the range of Iranian missiles, and that's not by mistake. They could have easily put these stealth bombers elsewhere. I presume they put them there for a reason, And when that whole thing pops off, that is the linchpin holding this entire geopolitical mess together. They're preparing for World War III. It's beyond obvious if you haven't figured it out just yet. J.D. Vance visiting the Arctic Circle in order to annex Greenland so that they can put more nukes there because they're going to war with Russia, even though it's for national security reasons and they specifically cite Russia as being the reason why. We're going to do business with the Russians, right? Talk about a charade, man. Trump is going to be imposing tariffs on pharmaceuticals. Remember we had the pharmaceutical expert, the Jace Medical guy, Dr. Sean Rowland, on the other day, who was talking about how, you got to stock up because the prices of medications are going to be going up soon. They're going to do it. The question is, why are they accelerating this? Why the rush? Because Trump doesn't have to do that. He doesn't have to make life immiserating for people who are already dealing with record inflation. And I mean the compounded effects of inflation. I'm not talking about the CPI, which was up once again, month over month, but is not certainly far off the records. People are struggling and it's going to get worse. That's just a fraction of the news that I could remember to talk about today. It's dizzying. It's such a frenetic news cycle today that on numerous occasions, I wanted to make a social media post that was more intuitively and emotionally driven. To say I have a bad feeling at this point in time is an understatement. There comes a certain point when you see the price of gold and silver moving upwards. If you're a person who is a stacker, and I'm not a stacker by any means, certainly not compared to some people, but if you're a person who looks at these things as being a barometer for social chaos, at the first time it's somewhat vindicating to know that you are on the right track, and then it becomes real, because then it becomes unnerving to know that this is real. They're divesting. The decoupling is happening much faster. It's accelerated. Why is Trump, Liberty Day, April 2nd, Why is he including all these things that are seemingly going to nuke and implode the stock market when it could be a more incremental process that could allow companies to adapt? Now, they might make the argument that if we don't do this, then we run the risk of not being able to do anything at all. That is the argument that I believe Scott Bessent made, that you have to hit the ground running and you have to make these changes fast. Otherwise, they'll be mired in red tape and bureaucracy. But it strikes me as quite obvious at this point in time that they're preparing for a major war. They're preparing for day X, and they're trying to fast track everything. They're trying to bring everything home. I mean, look at the repatriation of gold, guys. The answers are all there. The answers are all around you. Iran is the linchpin, and once that gets pulled, all bets are off. That's going to open up Russia's southern flank. It's going to create opportunity for the Russians, but also immense amounts of vulnerability. And if you think that a handful of stealth bombers is going to be sufficient, utilizing conventional ordnance, to topple the Iranian regime, then, my friends, you need to educate yourself about the situation. There are 6 to 10 million besieged militia inside Iran. People who are not necessarily trained, but they have some training. These are people who will defend the theocracy to the death, okay? Now, while they might be outnumbered by the more pro-Western elements of Iran, and I'm just assuming a best case scenario that they would be outnumbered, they got the guns, right? They have the capability. They can barely defeat Yemen. And Yemen is, while it is a mountainous region, the bunkers, the complexes they have there pale in comparison to what the Iranians have. Arguably, the Iranians have some of the most advanced subterranean facilities on Earth, and they intend to have to use them someday. You would not make such debilitating investments like that in a time where inflation is rampant, 50% inflation in Iran, a regime which is teetering, okay, on the brink of civil unrest. And yet they're investing billions and billions of dollars into these subterranean facilities and weapon systems. You think that they actually believe they're never going to have to use that stuff? Of course. Now, one of the commanders, I believe it was the Iranian Air Force, had made a statement and indicated that if they target our ships, we will follow their ships to the Gulf of Mexico, and that we have weapons that have the range to achieve that, essentially saying that we can hit the United States with missiles. So this leaves us to presume that the United States will have to use tactical nuclear weapons if they want to stand a hope in hell of targeting Ukraine. I don't know enough about these things, but I would presume they might first hit them with some conventional bunker busters in order to soften the ground a little bit, and then maybe drop some tactical nukes. I would not put it past them. We're already ethically beyond the Rubicon, I would say, with respect to what's happened in the Gaza Strip. It would not be a stretch. Would it basically burn a lot of bridges with the rest of the world? Probably. The rest of the world would probably look at that and say, okay, we've seen what you did in Gaza, right? But, you know, that's relatively benign in the grand scheme of things. But if you're dropping nukes on people, you just broke the seal. You are going to open up Pandora's box of nuclear proliferation, the likes of which the world has never seen. And you've also now set a new precedent that utilizing nuclear weapons can become normalized. Low-yield tactical nuclear weapons will become normalized. And then it becomes all the easier for the Russians to employ a similar tactic. Did I mention that gold was at $3,117? You know, it's incredible that some people just don't get it. And you know what I think it is? I had a bit of an epiphany the other day. The people who are in disbelief, who come here every day and leave trolling remarks, are the ones who truly appreciate how bad it could get when the lights go out. And because of that, they're in denial, okay? As preppers, we're actually optimists because we believe we can survive what's coming. Now, who is the greater fool? Who is the greater fool in that situation? Is it the person who thinks they can survive, so they prepare? Or is it the person who is unconsciously aware of how much it's going to suck and they really truly get it, and so they go into denial and they come on every video and they tell me how crazy I am, and it looks like I just got a text message, some shit's going down again. Oh boy. Yeah, this is it. Okay. So I'm going to tell you what's going on. The Paris Coalition of the Willing Summit has resulted in a major geopolitical shift. The first NATO-aligned troop presence inside Ukraine is in the final stages of planning. The chiefs of staff of Britain, France, and Germany will travel to Kiev to work on supporting Ukraine. Macron and Starmer are spearheading the deployment of European reassurance forces. It's just morphed from, trainers and instructors to peacekeepers to reassurance forces designed to stabilize Ukraine post-war. This is not a traditional combat deployment, but a force of 15,000 to 20,000 troops for just infrastructural security, right? Human shields to put in front of the nuclear power plants. Intelligence, hybrid warfare deterrence, and AI-based threat response. France, UK, and several Baltic Nordic countries remain undecided. France, UK, and several Baltic countries will most certainly participate. The undecided parties are Germany, Italy, and Spain, always on the fence. Zelensky has confirmed an imminent meeting between the Ukrainian General Staff and high-level military reps from partner nations. We will show our infrastructure, work with our partners, and refine our joint vision, he said. In addition to those deployments, air and naval assets are also expected to support this initiative. So they're talking about doing a no-fly zone, essentially, with deployments likely around ports, airfields, and communication hubs. They got to lock something in before the United States goes into Iran. And I would almost suspect that right when we see something tangible arise from this facade, this charade that is being enacted with the Black Sea grain deal or whatever it is, which would really just put us back to 2023 levels of escalation, which by some accounts was really still at an all-time high because it permitted the flying of ISR drones in the Black Sea, which of course implicates the West in targeting and doing strikes inside Russia. Now, there's some more rumor swirling today about Zelensky being given a counteroffer by the United States that they want $120 billion back and they want it paid with interest and all this stuff. It's hard to say what is just hearsay at this point in time because oftentimes people will take a soundbite, and of course Zelensky doesn't speak English as his first language. The translations aren't always good, so sometimes things get misinterpreted. But I stand by my original assessment that Trump and Putin are engaging in this public diplomatic facade for their own benefit, not because they believe it stands a hope in hell of surviving, certainly not surviving beyond 4 years. J.D. Vance explicitly stated that the reason why they're in the Arctic today in Greenland is to annex it so that they can weaponize it for national security, which means putting more nuclear weapons at Patuxent Air Force Base, space base. Okay, that's what's going down. Now, the Russians are accusing the UK and France. In fact, this was a big story on Russian media today of orchestrating the attacks on the Sudza pipeline recently, which of course would have been a breach of the critical infrastructure non-attack pact that the Russians and the Ukrainians allegedly agreed to via their American mediator, as crazy as that sounds, considering that the Americans are the puppets pulling the strings of Ukraine. But they're accusing UK and France of aiding in this missile strike, allegedly providing targeting coordinates. French satellites were used for navigation. Moscow claims the command to strike came from London. What a surprise. Maria Zakharova called it a clear violation of the energy truce and claimed it proved Kiev is not in control of its military. I believe I mentioned that the Russians have unveiled a new nuclear submarine armed with hypersonic Zircon missiles, one of many nuclear submarines currently out and about. Now, something that I haven't said on the channel is I'm a little concerned about this deployment of stealth bombers because this could be Day X related, this distribution of forces and getting these U.S. assets closer to the Russian theater without necessarily putting them in Europe, which would be a pretty dead giveaway, right? Because you could put these stealth bombers somewhere else, presumably. There's other bases, but they're flying these sorties from that particular base. Now, there probably is some logistical reasons as to why, refueling, the fact that it's out of range of what's known about Iranian missiles, but this could be part of a broader strategy, Day X positioning of assets, because now you essentially have a situation when factored into the U.S. assets in the further east in the Indo-Pacific, you have now big boomers, and you have them positioned, 7 of them, possibly 9, okay, stealth bombers, all in the Indo-Pacific. And then, of course, you have all your nuclear assets in Europe. And then J.D. Vance is in Greenland today. Okay, so who are you surrounding? You're surrounding Russia. You're surrounding the eastern countries. So it doesn't look good. Russia is preparing to do a new offensive and strategic posture. According to Zelensky, they're getting ready to invade the Sumy and Kharkov regions. We must look at the situation with our eyes wide open. Putin is preparing a new offensive. Concurrently, the German Federal Intelligence Service and the Bundeswehr have released a report suggesting that Russian authorities are likely preparing for a large conventional war against Nato. The report states, Putin perceives relations with the West as a systematic conflict and is prepared to use force to achieve his objectives. Now, I think when they say that, realistically, they understand what that means. That means Putin fighting Europe inside Ukraine. It doesn't mean Russia anytime soon being able to stretch its sphere of influence into the western parts of Europe. But indeed, Russia must prepare for a protracted conventional war and possibly a nuclear war with Europe. This could possibly explain the exodus, not only of gold from Europe, but also people from Europe, because they suspect that bad things are about to happen, okay? Now, this war mobilization that we're seeing in Europe is off the charts. They're talking about mandatory service, conscription in numerous countries, the EU and Ursula von der Leyen saying, yeah, you got to have 72 hours worth of food. I just hope my European brothers and sisters are preparing right now. Because if I was in Europe, I would probably leave depending on which part of Europe I was in. But I understand that's not, and you know, people who are patriotic, you're not going to leave, you're going to fight, right? I get that. But how do you prepare for such an eventuality? How do you prepare for a war being fought over your head? You know, read the Latvian survival guide, which surprisingly baits people in with the very innocuous suggestion that it's a 72-hour survival guide, and then you quickly come to find that they're fully preparing you for the psychological rigors of war. I would encourage people to check it out. I've done a detailed video on that in the past. Denmark has accelerated its plan to draft women into the military. This is Starship Trooper stuff. All of those movies we watched as a kid, you remember Toys with Robin Williams? When the kids were tricked into flying the drones? You know, the Starship Troopers, the co-ed, washrooms with the women and the guys who fought alongside each other. They've been priming us with this stuff for years, guys, okay? This is old news. Poland is initiating nationwide adult and youth military training programs. This is really old news that we've talked about on the channel before. If you've been, watching us daily, you get all this news. I mean, we were talking about that a month ago. We were talking about troops being deployed in Ukraine a year and a half ago. We talked about the exact plan that they're imposing right now. Iran has declared that it will strike U.S. bases in the region if Trump follows through on his 2-month ultimatum and attacks on Tehran. Now, we had a guest on yesterday. I would strongly encourage you to go and watch the interview we did with Weichert of the Weichert Report, Brandon Weichert. Excellent analysis, very compendious overview of everything that's happening in the Middle East. You got to go and watch that video. And he thinks that somewhere between 30 to 45 days is when they're going to take action on Iran. The clock is ticking across the board, right? They have to do these things fast because public support might possibly wane. And you got to do it while Trump's support is still relatively high, okay? And this is why they're rolling out all the trinkets and what is it, today? The Ark of the Covenant, I heard that's the most recent one. And, what else? The pyramids of Giza are doing some weird stuff underneath there. And, every day it's going to be something new. UFOs and just a big dog and pony show to keep you distracted. Iranian Foreign Minister Araghchi stated that Tehran has drafted a reply to Trump's letter and it will be transmitted via Oman. According to Trump, he said that Iran is very high on my list. They make very effective drones. Either way, we talk or very bad things will happen. Well, the Iranians have talked with Trump in the past. Trump essentially wants them to renounce and suspend any intentions and technical know-how and capability in order to not build nuclear weapons, which is incredibly vague on its face. It's really, they're asking for something that Iran would never be able to fulfill, especially if the true intentions of the United States, just like they were in Iraq, where they found that there were no evidence of weapons of mass destruction, their intentions supersede any possible way out of negotiations. So there's nothing Iran could do at this point. It's a done deal. All they can do is try to stall things. A U.S. official told Axios that the deployment of B-2 bombers at Diego Garcia in the Indian Ocean is not disconnected from President Trump's 2-month deadline for Iran, signaling this is preparation for a military contingency plan should diplomatic efforts fail. So they just admitted it. Now, the question is this the art of the deal? Who knows? I mean, if you just look at history, if you look at the Iraq War, the same thing is playing over and over again. Now, the fact that they haven't had Tulsi Gabbard come out and say, and I could tell by her body language that she wasn't saying what she actually thought. The fact that she hasn't come out and stated that Iran has nuclear weapons or that there is evidence thereof is a sign that they're stalling so that they can do this buildup. Because were they to come out in that intelligence brief with Tulsi and say, yes, we have evidence that they are making nuclear weapons. They did, Stratcom, say that they can do it quicker now, 14 days down to 7 days. But they haven't officially said that. Iran would know, they would know 100% that the goal was to go to war. And it was imminent. So they're postponing that. Switching pace here, global funds have sold U.S. equities at the fastest pace in history. Retail got rugged once again. Everybody filed back into the market. They were the ones that were buying while the hedge funds were selling. I tried to warn people a month ago that the market was crashing. Some of you listened and got out. Congrats. Prices are about to explode. Supply chains are going to be strained with these tariffs that are currently about to be unveiled on April 2nd. Get your medication, jacemedical.com. If you're Canadian, I would advise you to stock up because our prices are going up because it's almost impossible. I don't even know if this is some ploy by Amazon to try to take over because they're going to be the ones who are going to be well positioned, having warehouses on both sides of the border to game this system. As I indicated, the European Commission is now recommending all residents prepare a 72-hour emergency survival bag. Now, the video that came out, it was the EU Commissioner of Emergency Preparedness Planning or something. I can't remember what her name was, but she's joking and being very facetious about the concept of preparing for what everybody knows is a war with Russia. And just joking about it and just really Disneyland, Mickey Mouse style preparedness, 72 hours, really? And it's all because they don't want to panic the population. That's what it is. It simply boils down to that. Because, of course, it's hard to get public support for anything if they're worried that the world's going to end. Hungarian Foreign Minister Peter Szijjártó said, "Why should EU citizens in the 21st century prepare for survival? There is only one explanation. Brussels is preparing for war." Danish authorities in Eastern Bloc countries are expanding civil defense drills and blackout contingency plans. I talked about Greenland. Perhaps I didn't give enough attention to Germany seizing Russian tanker Aventin, marking the full confiscation, the first of its kind, of a sanctioned vessel and cargo. So they seized not only the vessel, but the 100,000 tons of crude on board. That's theft. Well, that is if there's, fair and just international law. And Vladimir Putin proposed UN-administered elections in Ukraine, declaring Zelensky's government to be illegitimate and refusing to negotiate under the current leadership. And the UN peacekeeping proposal was also rejected. So, in summary, Russia is accelerating its war posture, potentially going to be doing an offensive. Macron and Starmer are mobilizing European forces for a potential Ukraine deployment. Financial markets are in free fall. Inflation is spiking. Civil defense drills are expanding across Europe. The threat of Nato, Russia direct conflict is no longer hypothetical, and they're about to go to war with Iran. So, just keep prepping. Yeah. Have a good weekend.